I think we all have childhood traumas, or like we all have childhood, in some shape or form, we have childhood experiences that I wouldn't say like are problematic for us, but like affect us to this day. So, um, and it's a process to integrate those things. So, I can't tell you everything. Signs you need inner child work, man. If you're not satisfied or like fulfilled in everything you do in your life, you probably need to do inner child work. Why? The question is, why do we struggle with boundaries? I think it goes back to childhood and being taught that our needs don't matter in some way or
Mm,
some form, or being taught like you have to like please other people or like sacrifice yourself, you know, um, sacrifice yourself at the expense of comfort for another person. But yeah, it's definitely powerful to like get your mind on paper. I think it helps to like release things and like really get clarity and like externalize like what you're experiencing in work for sure.
all right, greetings all, and welcome back to Living Once Twice, where we rewrite narratives, reinvent ourselves, and reimagine the possibilities for our lives. Appreciate you all tuning in for today's episode. I'm very excited to bring on today's guest, Kalen Grant. Kalen is a wellness creator, conscious warrior, and mental health advocate. As creator of Granted by Kalen, Kalen inspires and raises the consciousness of his audience by sharing personal stories, educational content, and wellness tips around everything ranging from setting healthy boundaries, mental health, self-healing, and so much more. Kalen, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm good, Justin, man. Thank you for that intro. Thank you, man. I'm good. I'm good. I'm
Good,
glad to
good.
be here.
I appreciate you being here. And before we dive into your story, the great insight that you got to share with the listeners, the audience, got to give the folks some background context because Kayla and I, we both met as we're past alumni of Nia Rigel, who was a guest on this show, Restoring the King platform. Kaylin, as I was sharing before we started recording, just a huge, huge fan of your content. Everything you share about wellness, self-healing, all of its fire really resonates with the topics that we dive into on the show. So when I reached out to you, you said you would be down to team up for an episode. I was like, let's get it because you got so much great insight and inspiration to share. And I know the audience is going to gain a lot from this conversation. So I'm ready to get into it. How you feeling?
I'm ready, man. I'm ready, man. This is gonna be I think it's gonna be a pretty good conversation, man. So I'm
Cool,
ready.
cool. So there are a lot of different places I want to go with today's conversation, Kayla. I want to talk about everything from the road to becoming a self-healer, setting healthy boundaries, and also the power of journaling, because I know that's a common practice you and I share. But I want to start with an area of your journey that I'm really in awe of, and it's really just your background for the audience. And I want to start by sharing something that you posted about with your wellness, your journey. And you talked about this this is a quote. You said in 2014, a mental health physician told me that I was schizophrenic, and that you said this isn't true. It took a lot of courage for me to fight against the narrative that I had for myself and that I started to believing that I possessed a mental health illness that was noted to be untreatable. I just find this really interesting for you to share so vulnerably and so open your story. So, can you speak more about that part of your life and how it inspired you in the work that you're doing today?
Speak about that part of my life, how it inspired me, for sure, for sure. In 2014, like I said, it was my first year in college. I went to Kansas State University, which is a PWI. And for the first time in my life, I was met with like an environment different from what I grew up in. I was very like social here in my city of Wichita, and like never really struggled with friends or anything. But when I went to college and I actually stayed off campus, no, I was still on campus, but I wasn't in the dorms. I was in an apartment complex because it was like overflow. So I kind of struggled to make friends, and it led to like uh, almost a stage of depression in my life that I felt it before, I guess, when I was in high school, but I still had like people and like other things around me to kind of pull me out of that. But yeah, I think it led to like a depressive stage. And like after a while, I knew something was wrong, and I went to go see the campus doctor. I was describing to him, the things I was experiencing. And after a couple of meetings, he told me that I was schizophrenic. Oh, he's like, it sounds like schizophrenia. And I'm like, okay, you got to trust what person of authority, I guess, or like somebody who who, if somebody in a white lab coat comes in and tells you like, this is your circumstances, you're almost gonna believe them, right? So I was almost like encompassing all my problems into me like being schizophrenic. And once he told me that, I was like going on
Mm,
Google, it's like schizophrenia, uh, and like I'm not gonna lie, like that almost became my, I wouldn't say reality, but like my identity.
mm,
Yeah, I based like a lot of my problems around that. Like all my problems in life is like, oh, it's just because I'm schizophrenic, or I just like kind of labeled myself as like an outcast, and like kind of went through like I wouldn't say like an emo stage or anything like that, but like I don't know, or like a stage of rebellion. I used to listen to like a lot of XXXTentacion. Like if you think about those guys, like XXXTentacion and like Trippie Redd, I still like Trippie Redd. Trippie Redd makes some good music, but like I was in that kind of stage of my life. Yeah, man, it led to like a lot of things, man. I experienced a lot of things. Just from that, like it kind of snowballed into a lot of other different things. I dealt with like drug addiction. I've been clean for a very long time.
hmm
But like, yeah, it led to like drug addiction, uh, bad coping mechanisms. Uh, I spent some time. I've been in like different mental health institutes because I was still believing that story. Like it was ingrained in me. Like it was what I was believing. And the power of belief is like crazy. So I say that because I've experienced a lot. I've experienced a lot of things within like Western mental health. And I see like, man, there's just with me experiencing and going through the things that I experienced and now like learning and understanding the things that I know, I see like the issues that we have in our mental health institutes, and that's something that's very meaningful to me. Yeah,
wow. I mean, hearing you talk about the impact and the power of that label and how you began to start internalizing it, and then kind of the rabbit hole and the snowball effect that that had on you, I think is impactful, because we live in a world where we do put labels and associations on so many different things and what that could mean. And once again, that you talked about that power of belief and starting to internalize it. So what then was the turning point for you where you started to almost like push back either against that label, or realize, to your credit, that you could become a self-healer, or start to take responsibility for something that people could say is untreatable, or something that you maybe you can't overcome? How did you start to start to heal yourself, and to push back against that?
definitely. So that narrative stayed with me throughout college. Somehow I still graduated college through whatever I was going through, but it was after I graduated, I moved to Denver, and I have a friend whose mother is like what does she do? She does like reading. She's like very spiritually in touch. And I think I told Jasmine, her daughter, that I was like struggling. She's like, okay, like you could talk to my mom. And Andrea, she was telling me, she really got me into like the practice of like meditation. She introduced it to me. I had already been meditating, but I don't know. She was like really planting some seeds in me at the time. Was telling me to meditate, told me to pick up the book, The Power of Now. I picked up that book. Um, and I was telling her like all the adversities and like, I wouldn't say adversities, but like labels, or like boxes I was almost putting myself in. And she was like, one, not to believe everything that everybody tells me, and like she was telling me basically it's a gift. She was like, it's actually a gift, and like to really look at it differently. So um I say she kind of got me started on like my spiritual journey somewhat. I dabbled in like understanding like, nah, she kind of really got me started in like spirituality for sure, for sure.
Yeah. I think this is great in terms of you talking about how you could use a label as a gift. I've never heard anyone reframe it that way, and I think that's a very, very powerful reframe. So I want to go deeper into like your spiritual journey. I love that you talked about the Edgar Tolle book, the Power of Now. So thinking back to like you reading that book and going on this spiritual journey, what were you starting to learn or discover about yourself, that and starting to see once again this label as a gift?
Mm, what was I starting to learn about myself? I think specifically with like Eckhart Tolle, He like talks a lot about like the mind, and you're not the mind. He talks about like all the games of the mind, and like in the New
Mm.
Earth, he talks about the ego and like really disidentifying from like your mind, I guess, and like being the awareness. She definitely it introduced me to like the concept of like awareness. I started watching YouTube videos about like Buddhism and all types of other like schools of thought and stuff and philosophy. So uh I don't know. It kind of I wouldn't say awakened me. Yeah, it awakened me to like a lot of truths that I wasn't like too aware of or like informed on at the time.
So if I understand correctly, this was a powerful word that I talked about in your bio is consciousness. And I love how Eggert talks about sometimes we're doing things unconsciously, but once we start to become conscious, we could take our agency back. And so this kind of ties into another question I want to ask you, which is about self-healing. And in your work, you talk about how self-healing, it's a responsibility for us to heal ourselves. We can't necessarily wait or delegate that responsibility. And one step in the self-healing process that I appreciate that you dive into is inner child work. And I know Nia talks about inner child work as well. So I'd love to hear you share as you've kind of evolved in your healing journey. What is inner child work? And yeah, what could be some of those signs that we, if we're unsure, we need to do inner child work that we need to be aware of or looking out for? Because once again, I think in order for us to start healing ourselves, we got to go back to the roots. And we know that the roots sometimes are a part of our past. So anything you could share just about what inner child work is, and then what are some signs out there for folks who maybe aren't conscious that they need to start doing that inner child work?
What inner child work is, okay, and the signs that you need to do it. Inner child work is, to me, it's like almost like looking, in some ways, it's like looking in the dark or like looking in the shadow, like looking at the things you're afraid to look at, or like, yeah, definitely looking into the shadows. I've learned a lot about relationships recently, and like understanding my attachment style and how I got that. So, uh, quick spill on that. I guess your first relationships with your caregivers set the template for your relationships for the rest of your life. Um, and as like a lot of people will say, or like I wouldn't say, but this is honestly truth, is that your childhood experiences from like ages like 0, I think it's like 7 or 8, those those create your inner child, and that inner child stays with you for the rest of your life. And in a lot of ways, you're still living out the same stories or like seeking out the same things that you didn't get as a child. I say that sets like the template for a lot of like your characteristics for the rest of your life. So that's kind of what inner child work is to me. It's something I'm still exploring. I think it's like kind of like self discovery too. It's a process of like self discovery, but definitely looking in the shadows in the process of self discovery. Some of the signs that you need to do inner child work. I'm actually gonna post a reel here. There's like a sound going around about I don't know if you've seen it. It's like childhood trauma can look like, and then it's like this lady and she's like listing off a whole bunch of things. It's like a trending audio on Instagram. I'm gonna create something soon with it, so you guys will see it. But I think it's like codependency is one, and like
Mm-hmm.
seeking external validation, or I think we all have childhood traumas, or like we all have childhood in some shape or form we have childhood experiences that I wouldn't say like are problematic for us, but like affect us to this day. So um and it's a process to integrate those things. So I can't tell you everything. Signs you need inner child work, man. If you're not satisfied or like fulfilled in everything you do in your life, you probably need to do inner child work. I think
Yeah.
everybody should do it, honestly.
Now I agree with you, and there's so much that I want to talk about and stay with this inner child work piece of, and I love what you were talking about of how it stays with us. Some of those formidable years from 0 to 7, that stays with us when we're 17, 27, 37, beyond. And I know some of those signs too. I mean, you talked about like the codependency, needing the outside validation. It could be maybe how do we react to certain things when we don't get our way? How do we handle boundaries, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But 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 Kayla, something that really sticks out with me, resonates with me, is like you said, it stays with us, and it's us in the shadows. And you highlight the importance of, okay, if this is going to be a part of our being as we get older and as we evolve, we got to learn to accept ourselves. Like part of our process of healing is self-acceptance. And there's a quote I want to go back to that you highlighted that I was like, man, that really is powerful here is healing is not becoming the best version of yourself. And this goes to your point about the shadows. Healing is letting the worst parts of yourself be loved. So we all carry a past. You talk about we all carry baggage and need things that we need to work on. We all carry trauma. So how do we though, or I guess what's your advice to someone out there who's carrying trauma, who's carrying parts of themselves that maybe they have shame, hatred about, insecurity about? How do you accept that? Like what advice would you give to someone who is struggling with the acceptance of their past, especially if it's something that they carry a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, a lot of insecurity about?
That's a good question. What would I tell somebody who's struggling to accept themselves? I say it's a journey of self acceptance. It's not like a switch you flip, like, oh, I accept myself now. It's a it's a constant. What I'm learning about healing is like it's a constant process of integration, and like I said, these things will like stick with you, but you kind of learn to like manage them, manage them a little differently. But I guess my advice for somebody would definitely be to like make a conscious intention or effort to really like connect with yourself or get like intimate with yourself and get to know yourself. Um, and like do that for the rest of your life and like I guess be patient with the process, be kind to yourself throughout the process. Kindness is key. um yeah, put your I say another thing that's helped me is like putting myself in environments and like listening to different audibles about self-compassion and self-acceptance to like
Mm,
really expand myself beyond like whatever my baseline is of understanding and like challenge my ideas. That's kind of helped me with like
yeah.
self-acceptance, putting myself in the right environments.
And I love some of these tips that you offer about saying it's a process. This is a journey, not a sprint. It's going to be a lifelong thing. So we just got to sign up for it and just be buckled in. And I want to go back to like earlier parts of your story because many of us do have had bouts of like addiction, and you talked about I think drug addiction in your past. So for you, like what was your process to once again accepting like that phase of your life, that part of your life? Like what were you saying to yourself? Did you carry any guilt or any shame or anything about it that you needed to once again learn to be compassionate about, learn to love and give grace to?
Good question. I don't think there was an exact point where I was like, okay, I accept that about myself. And to be honest, I think there's still things about that whole experience that I probably still am working to unpack. I guess my one of my biggest pieces of advice to anybody on this healing journey is like don't focus your attention too much on your darkness because that's only gonna make you like feel. I've done that where like I was like, man, I gotta heal, and I'm thinking about everything I gotta heal. No, that's draining. That's really draining. Um, but I'm sorry. What was the question? What was the question? What was I
Yeah. So
answering?
it's once again just going to this, and you're starting to highlight it of like we all got that the shadow, the mistakes of the past, the things that we might have done to numb ourselves, to self-soothe ourselves that weren't healthy, and we can't just forget about that past. So it's kind of like, well, how do we become more compassionate with that and make peace with it? And I think something that you're hitting on is we don't self like sabotage and sink ourselves in the past too much. We don't stay too in the past. It happened. We can't go back and unring those bells. Like I have an episode on self-forgiveness. And it's one of those things where it's like that's a part of the process of making amends is saying, okay, it happened, but I'm going to learn from it and go forward. So it sounds like a part of your process, and you can correct me on this, is like also not sulking in it too much.
Definitely. Definitely. I think for me, something that's helped me, I was going to touch on this at the end, but something that's helped me is to like get clear about what I want to do in life. Um, and like, it's really like the process of like transmuting. this is kind of like that concept of like non-duality of like darkness and light. So without the darkness, there could be no light, but you can also transmute or alchemize your darkness into light. That's kind of
Mm.
like what I'm doing
Oof.
through my content, man. I learned that I got a book by Thich Nhat Hanh. Rest in peace, Thich Nhat Hanh. He's a Buddhist monk, man. I got like a lot of his
Yeah.
books. No Mud, No Lotus. It's one of my favorite. Yeah, uh, yeah. He kind of taught me about that concept of like darkness and light. But yeah, I think if you keep your attention, I try and keep my attention as much as I can on like my light or like to be in like my heart energy and yeah, man, that's kind of how I work with like my darkness. I'm still on the journey, but yeah, that's how I'm seeing it right now.
Yeah, but no, but what you're sharing there, I think can offer a lot of inspiration and hope to people of like you can use that. You need the dark. We need the dark to get to the light. And the fact that you can use it to do some powerful things. And once again, that's a lot of what your content is of what you share with people. And this is why I'm excited to let people into your genius, because that's what you're doing. You're showing people like, hey, you can use trials, tribulations to do and offer a lot of good into the world. And I would be curious to also hear about like the role of therapy, because once again, I shared earlier on too, like that was kind of our intersection of meeting through therapy. So what was your journey into therapy, and how has that been a tool for you in your healing, in your, say, even bringing perspective to the dark so that you could use it for light?
Mm, my journey with therapy, uh, man, by not by choice, but in the beginning of my like when I got my first therapist, it was a woman who wasn't of color, and I really wasn't seen in that space, and I've fired I've fired a couple therapists, man, like that's I guess that's a whole nother jit is talking about like, you know, finding a therapist that like really like fits you or like someone you can resonate with. So um I definitely think that's important when like looking for a therapist is finding somebody who you can like actually resonate with, feel safe with, sharing whatever you know you want to be seen or like understand or unpack in that space. That's kind of my I'm still working on that, man. I gotta I don't even know if my therapist is not gonna stay around because I might be moving here soon. But I actually work with a therapist. I wish I could work with her, but she's out in New York and I'm in Kansas and like the state laws, you can't do that. She's not my therapist, but she's my coach in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um I hope that answered the question about my journey with like therapy, man. I learned a lot from therapists, man. Therapists are like really good people. Um, but yeah, definitely as a man of color, I find it helpful to work with like a woman or man of like color because they can kind of understand some of the things we're up against in this world and like relate to us a little bit differently.
Yeah, now you offer some good insight too, and we've talked about this in the past on this show of the importance of you got to find the right therapist, just like folks got to find the right barber, dentist, hairstylist, whatever you may be. The right person's out there, and you might have to go through and date a couple therapists to find out your fit, but your person is out there. So I want to pivot a little bit and talk about boundaries, because I think this is one of the things that so many of us out there struggle with, and it even connects to that inner child work, because as children with family dynamics, things of that nature, we could learn or be role modeled unhealthy boundaries, or not a healthy way to go about stating our needs and our preferences, and how that can be honored. So I want to hear you share more just about what, in your opinion, Kalen, is one of the reasons why do we struggle with boundaries in our lives? What have you seen? What have you observed of why so many of us out there are looking to improve upon in this area?
Why the question is why do we struggle with boundaries? I think it goes back to childhood and being taught that our needs don't matter in some way or
Mm,
some form, or um being taught like you have to like please other people or like sacrifice yourself, you know, sacrifice yourself at the expense of comfort for another person. It's really unique to everybody's childhood situation, but those are some of the things. It goes back to childhood and like how were you raised about like your your needs? Like, were you in an environment where you had to shape shift because you had to be in tune with like how your caregiver was? Did your parents teach you to like be kind to other people? Um, which kindness is okay, or like to be like overly nice, to like literally sacrifice yourself. In my situation, to like people please in some ways. But yeah, I think it definitely goes back to childhood and what we were taught for sure.
Yeah, and you talked about that aspect of like people pleasing and even going back to what you shared about from 0 to 7, these things become a part of our programming, and we need to learn to rewrite them. So on the other end of that spectrum, for those who are wanting to work on this area of life, but are struggling because it's hard to undo 20, 30 years of just that wiring of from childhood, are there any small simple steps that you would offer to folks of how they can become more comfortable setting boundaries in their life if this is once again an area that they want to work on?
More comfortable setting boundaries. Start small. That's the first thing. Don't try and like set any grand boundaries. Slowly start to set your boundaries. Also, like inform yourself about like pick up a book like Nedra Tawabi's book about like
Mm,
boundaries and really like
yes.
inform yourself because something I've learned on this healing journey is like as you like my idea of a lot of the things that I thought I was gonna learn, like boundaries for sure. I don't know. I'm still learning about boundaries. Like my idea of boundaries is always transforming. So like to learn from somebody else is definitely going to kind of uh restructure or kind of change the way you like see boundaries. Cause like at one point I thought boundaries were like walls and they're not. So I was like actually having rigid boundaries. Um so definitely I say inform yourself, practice. It's not gonna be perfect. Start small, pick up a book, have a conversation with a friend about boundaries if they're into that kind of stuff. Um, yeah, I think it's definitely just getting acquainted with it for sure.
I appreciate you offering that insight and also talking about Nadra's book, which is incredibly insightful and full of so many like tools and strategies and just a deeper dive to help us all work on this route or this area of our life because it does lead to like healthy relationships, most importantly with ourselves, but obviously others in our lives. And you even offering and talking about how you used to just put the brick wall up and keeping the rigid boundaries and thinking that's kind of what it was, but you've you've rewrote that narrative and you kind of even evolved your own thinking around boundaries. So I hope folks check out your page to learn more.
No stuff.
So Caitlin, before we wrap up, I want to talk about one of my favorite tools is and you talk about this, the power of journaling. So could you share more about the power of journaling and what benefits can we all get from it?
The power of journaling. What benefits you could get from it? I think journaling is a good form of release for sure. It can help you get clarity, whether you're just brain dumping, like doing morning pages, just scribbling whatever is coming to your mind, just getting your thoughts out. Or if you're like doing journal prompts or like inner child work and like seeing, um, what's coming up for you. I guess I got so acquainted with journaling, it's crazy. I have a shadow coach, and like when he asks questions, I don't really, the thing is not to think about it, but like to like just let out the first thing that comes out. So I actually use pen and paper now. So he'll like ask a question like, "What am I afraid is going to happen if X, Y, and Z?" And I don't even think about it; just immediately write it. Um, but yeah, it's definitely powerful to like get your mind on paper. I think it helps to like release things and like really get clarity and like externalize like what you're experiencing in work for sure. I also do like man, if I'm like emotionally triggered at times, I learned this. It's like an emotional release form where you'd be like, I feel angry because, and you just go to town on the piece of paper. Like, I feel angry because yada 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 yada. And it's like it's a form of release, man. So there's like a lot of different benefits from like uh journaling. Like I think it's also helps you get to know yourself, man. Uh yeah. Journaling is a very good habit, man. Powerful practice.
Yeah, I appreciate you speaking on journaling because I don't think it's something many of us as adults do enough of. And you talked about it could just be a release, the outlet that it could offer when you're feeling emotions coming up, because the body keeps score. So if we don't get it outside of us, we can't work with something and be able to process it. And so I love how you talk about your practice. So it sounds like, Kalen, you use journaling in a different way. So is it something that you do on a daily basis? Do you start off with like morning pages to kick your day off? Do you do something in the evening time? Like, what does your journaling practice look like?
It's been shape shifting because I'm like really releasing myself from like I almost say like in some ways rigid boundaries with myself. I'm trying to like open myself to like more free flowing days. Like for example, this morning I had a pretty good journaling day. I oftentimes write. I'm doing writing more. I used to do typing on my phone, but I start my morning by writing what I'm grateful for. And then from there, man, it's like whatever thoughts are just coming to my mind, just like to get them out on paper. From there, like see like what direction I'm going towards, or like what I'm feeling that day. Today was like I got like 3 pages out of like just uh stuff that was just in my mind and I just needed to like be with myself with. So I also use like journal prompts if there's like something I want to explore. Yeah, I'll use journal prompts if I'm struggling to like find that inspiration or like that spark or like direction. Journal prompts are very, very helpful. So that's kind of my practice. It's kind of as needed. Not as needed, just as I feel. But it's definitely
Mm-hmm.
something I do regularly.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. And I don't know about you. Do you go back and revisit old
I
journals, things of that nature? Like, or do you kind of, all right, the past is the past, and I need to get that out at that time and continue on.
I don't do that as much as I wish I did. As like revisiting those things. I don't. I
No, I,
don't.
I totally get it. I wish I did. I hear you on that. I wish I did more to reflect. And sometimes it is good to see where you were time stamped in this period and how far you've come. So, but I get it. I totally
Yeah.
get it. But I want to go back to another practice before we get into the each one teach one sections, because you talked about as a part of your conscious awakening was the aspect of meditation. And what's your meditation practice looking like? Like how do you still use and tap into meditation now these days?
I meditate every day. I've been meditating every day for a while. It's one of the first things I do in the morning to get like myself centered and my energy in
Mm-hmm.
a more coherent state. That's really what it. Yeah, it's one of the first things I do in the morning. In the past, man, I used to like. I'll share this. I used to like meditate before like anything I did. I thought I had to like meditate before that because then I'd be like still and grounded. In some ways, it became like I wouldn't say a toxic coping mechanism, but it like became like a habit that I needed to let go of because it was like anytime I do something, I gotta meditate, and it was starting to get frustrating to me. So uh, no, it's a good practice. Whenever I think like especially now, it's important to like stay grounded and centered. So if I catch myself like ever like drifting or not feeling grounded, I'll it'd be like 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. After my morning meditation is needed, I'll lay down, do another meditation, really like surrender and get still, and it helps every time. As hard as it is sometimes to get to the mat, it helps every time.
And what's your practice? Like, do you have a mantra? Do you just let the thoughts just flow and
hmm
go by like clouds?
I use Insight Timer.
Okay.
That the therapist I told you about, she actually makes not my therapist, but she's in New York. She actually makes meditations, and I'm like switching up my practice. So I do guided meditations, um, and I'm using hers now. I'm actually like expanding myself and like not doing the same practices I always did. But I used to use Insight Timer and like just search whatever I was experiencing or like whatever popped up on my explore page and like follow those. But now, man, it's just something about connecting with a person for me of like color
Hmm.
and like connecting with their work that kind of resonates with me. So I'm actually today was the first day I used her meditation in the morning. I actually did it yesterday because we had a monthly meeting, and I was like, man, that meditation was amazing. Like I'm about to do that again, and I did it today. So we're gonna keep moving forward with that. But to answer your question, guided meditations is what I'm doing. No transcendental meditations. I do one of the very first ones Andrea I told me about in 2018 is metta meditation, which is loving
Hmm.
kindness meditation. So one of the things I would repeat to myself is it's like may I be happy, may I be healthy, wait, may I be happy, may I be healthy, may I be at peace, may I be at ease. So if I'm not doing any guided meditations, that's one of my go-to mantras right there. It's
Oh, I like that. I like
meditation.
that. Ooh, I
Yeah.
love that. Word. So, Kalen, what we're going to do, I appreciate so much of what you've shared throughout this conversation about everything: meditation, journaling, healing, self compassion, love. I want to dive into our each one teach one sections, which will hopefully give folks a little bit more insight into you. And so I'm going to just share 4 questions with you, and you just share what comes to mind. All right, you ready for it?
Yes, sir. Let's get it.
All right. So the first question is, what's one book that you would recommend that has been a game changer for you?
Ooh, yo, I love books. Recently I read this book. I don't know if it's recency bias. It's 2 books. Can I say 2 books?
Oh yeah,
Two.
all right, yeah, for sure, for sure.
So the most recent one that I read that was really influential was the Bhagavad Gita, and I want to reread that book. Um, and what's another influential book? I want to say Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, but honestly, I read a book called Power versus Force by David Hawkins. It's a book about consciousness, and that's one of my favorite books. I actually gave those recommendations out the other day, and I'm gonna stick with those two. Those are two of my favorite books to date.
Good. Those are 2 books I have not heard of, so I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah,
So the next
good
question
books.
is, what's one habit or practice that has been most impactful in your lifestyle design?
Clarity, clarity, and knowing where I'm going, whether it be a vision board, planning out my week, organization. Um,
Mm,
it's like, yeah, definitely clarity, planning, organization. So creating vision boards and then breaking that into like smaller pieces, putting it in my planner and things like that. You got to know where you're going, man. So
yes.
that's been helpful for me.
Yeah. Now I'm right there with you on the clarity piece. Read Brendan Burchard's High Performance Habit. He talks about with no clarity, there's no progress. So to start off by getting clear on whatever it is, your what, your why, your how, whatever, I agree with you on how it can just help us to stay aligned, give us direction, keep us grounded. So that's a great practice and habit there. Um,
No stuff.
the, the next one is, if you could create any law or policy that everyone would need to abide by, what would it be?
Sheesh, that's a tough question. Man, I just tell everybody to have empathy and compassion. That's it. That's a hard law to enforce. But yeah, man, I'd instill the virtue of like empathy and compassion. That's it, man. For yourself, for others, man. If we had a lot more empathy and compassion in this world, I think it'd be a lot better place.
Good, good right there. Good right there. So, Kayla, the last rapid fire question I have for you that I'm asking all the guests this season is, when you think about who you've become today, what's the biggest limiting belief that you held about yourself that you needed to let go of?
I think, especially like with the work I'm doing now on Instagram, it's like I'm not it's probably like the things that I do. Like I knowing myself, I know that I struggle with like self-doubt and like it's crazy. I can get all the praise in the world about the things that I'm doing, but I still don't think like, the things that I do are always like good enough. I think we all tell ourselves the lie that we're not worthy in some way or another. That's just our ego. But mine is that my conscious lie. It's like that I can't do the things that I'm not capable. It's just I'm not capable. I guess in short, I'm not capable of doing the things that I want to do and like to the level that I want to do it at. That's a challenge I face every day, man. It's like feel the fear and do it anyway. It's like
Mm,
even in the face of that fear, like limiting belief, still like I move forward. So yeah,
That's good. That's good. Fear the fear and do it anyway. So you start to share a little bit about the work you do online, Kalen. So I'd love for you to share with our audience, like, what's next for you and where could they go to learn more about you and tap into your genius?
Oh God. So follow you can follow me on Instagram at Granted by Kalen. That's about all I have right now as far as my main platforms. I haven't told anybody about this, but I was thinking about starting a YouTube channel, so we'll see where that goes. Hopefully you can see that link in the bio here soon. But yeah, that's the best place to find me at Granted by Kalen on Instagram. If you got TikTok, I'm on TikTok too, but the content isn't the same. My TikTok ain't the same. I got like 10 followers on TikTok, so
Hey, that's good. That's 10 is better than 0. So,
yeah.
it's a process. But Kalen, once again, bro, I appreciate you being on, your transparency and your honesty with your journey, and just taking folks along for the ride and letting us, once again, you just sharing your light, you taking your experiences in life and turning them into insight, into inspiration, into energy, and putting so much just wonderful content into the world that I talked about before we hopped on. I was like, man, you're inspiring me to keep going. So just thank you for how you're offering yourself, coming on here and offering everything that you've had to our audience. And folks, please be sure to tap in with Kalen and everything that he's doing on Instagram, TikTok. Let's get the number of followers up. And yeah, just stay tuned and continue to watch your journey continue to unfold. So thanks again for your time today.
Thank you, my guy. I appreciate it. This is my first podcast interview, man. Thank you so much. I I'm so glad to be here. So I appreciate it.
Hey, first of many I feel coming.
Oh
We'll
God.
all have to stay tuned.
Yeah, man.
So thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. Once again, that is it for today's episode. I'd like to thank y'all all for your presence and tuning in today. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe, share the Living Once Twice podcast on anywhere from Instagram, LinkedIn, or wherever, and sharing a review on iTunes. And also be sure to follow us and Kalen on all the platforms, including Living Once Twice on Instagram, reaching out to you all through the time and the space that separates us to say, remember, your dream life is waiting for you. It's time to go for it. You deserve it. Catch you later on Living Once Twice.